What are you doing eating?
Well, it's mainly for survival. But I also enjoy the fruity tastes.
If you don't recognize this face, you probably didn't turn on a TV for a good 10 years or so. You may not know his name is Eric Foreman, essentially the main character of That 70s Show. Well, actually, you might be confused. It's the character you probably know. But you might have turned on That 70s Show and not seen this guy's face. It was jarring for a lot of fans when they received the news that the actor who played him, Topher Grace, would not be returning for the show's 8th and final season. So what happened here? Everything in season 7 was set up to have us believe that Eric was all set to become a teacher. So why did he suddenly get written off to Africa and replaced with this weird Randy character?
Paper again, Fatso? I win.
Okay, let me try.
Well, let's take a look at why they fired Eric Foreman from That 70s Show, or really what happened in general. Eric Foreman is the centerpiece of That 70s Show, and he's often likened to Opie from The Andy Griffith Show. He is, more often than not, the voice of reason amongst the show's cast of colorful characters, the lens through which we view the events of the show. Voice of reason in a comedy show often serves as the voice of the audience. As already mentioned, Eric often says what the audience is thinking, which in turn tethers our perception of what is funny about the show to his reality. Though the show does its best to provide perspectives from all of its characters, it's Eric's POV that we return to with the most frequency. His character effectively serves as a grounding tool for some of the show's weirder, zanier moments. But Eric is easy to relate to. He's the everyman, mostly portrayed as a good-natured person, which is something hopefully you strive to be. He also shows a lot of weakness and vulnerability, which is another element to his character that we as viewers gravitate toward. We care about him. We're upset when he fails, and we're proud of him when he stands up for himself. There's a little Eric Foreman in all of us, ideally. In fact, it doesn't make a ton of sense for the show to exist without him at all. And honestly, That 70s Show really had a tough time surviving without its main character. A story you've probably heard time and again, a la The Office. Viewership plummeted after Eric was written off the show, and not even the introduction of this Randy character was capable of saving it. So the question remains, why was this decision made? Well, despite the fired series titling, the decision to leave the show ultimately landed on Topher Grace's own shoulders. To understand what brought him to the difficult decision of leaving the show that kickstarted his career, we'll need to look at what life is like for an actor when they are contractually bound to a television series. Sitcoms are very different than single-camera television shows. They are often shot using a 3-camera setup, which is used because it ultimately cuts down on production time, thanks to the ability to get 3 different shots at once without the need to reset lighting, something that often takes hours to do for each shot. And with all that in mind, well, you can imagine how things go. In order to get the shots that are required to make a television show, it requires a lot of time to choreograph the actor's movements. Blocking, for those who are unaware of the terminology, takes a few rehearsals to get right. This all adds to the time in which the actors need to be on set, so this becomes a give and take. Time saved, time spent. Being contractually bound is such a time-consuming process in general can be pretty stifling for an actor who's trying to break into other projects, as much of their time is spent working on just one show. Just ask Michael J. Fox, who had to be carried out of his bed and onto set for Back to the Future while he was filming Family Ties. Now, it's not to say that Topher Grace was unable to land film roles while working on the show. He secured a minor role in 2003's Mona Lisa Smile, had a major role in 2004's Win a Date with Tad Hamilton, which you probably don't remember. It's just that sometimes passion can outweigh a paycheck. Topher Grace wanted the freedom to pursue the projects that he wanted to pursue freely, and was tired of having to pass on projects due to his obligations to a waning sitcom, as he saw it. It's not an uncommon story. Grace was far from the first lead actor to leave a sitcom in pursuit of other projects, and he would not be the last. And sometimes it all works out really well for the actor. Look at Steve Carell leaving The Office, and then almost immediately after receiving an Oscar nom for Foxcatcher. Kal Penn leaving House to work on the Obama administration, and after Fresh Prince went off the air, Will Smith went on to become one of the biggest names in entertainment, well, ever. But sometimes it doesn't work out quite as well. Suzanne Summers left Three's Company and ended up as the spokesperson for Thigh Master. Topher Grace landed somewhere kind of in between. He isn't cranking out lead role after lead role in Hollywood blockbusters, but he's been able to land some roles that I would call big and work with some incredible directors. He played Eddie Brock or Venom in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3, David Duke in Spike Lee's BlacKkKlansman, and Getty in Christopher Nolan's Interstellar. Sure, he hasn't become some kind of household megastar, but he's at a point in his career that most actors dream of getting to. Financially stable with the ability to pick and choose the projects they want to work on, which was his goal in the first place upon leaving the show. It's not a place many actors are able to get to in their careers. But another big reason for Topher's departure was, in fact, financial stability. He had made a ton of money working on That 70s Show. He was making anywhere between $250,000 and $300,000 per episode, and he was on the show for 178 episodes. Needless to say, money was no longer a concern for this blossoming actor. When you begin your career by being set for life, it can really give you a leg up as you progress into other projects. After realizing, though, that they were losing Topher Grace, the showrunners of That 70s Show initially had the intent of hiring Mad TV alumni Josh Myers to take over the role of Eric. They even had a line of explanatory dialogue ready in which Eric would say that he returned from Africa a changed man. We've seen stuff like this before. The Fresh Prince Aunt Viv switch did something similar. And they realized it was an objectively terrible idea, so the decision was made to create an entirely new character. Enter Randy. Well, fan response to the character was lukewarm at best, and viewership began to decline rapidly, and understandably so. In real life, when a close friend leaves to better their lives on their own terms, we don't just go off and replace that friend with Seth Meyers' brother. We stay in touch, we talk on the phone, we write letters, and we make plans to visit. This level of normal, understandable, real-world behavior isn't attainable when an actor leaves the show beyond maybe mentioning that he sent a letter or something. When an actor leaves a show, they usually leave for good, and every trace of them that ever existed is usually stripped and replaced in favor of driving new plotlines. When a television show loses the most important character and tries to replace them in a way that feels disingenuous, like they're shoving him or her down their throats, and by their throats I mean the characters, but also ours, we, and I would imagine the characters, should feel almost resentful in a way. It's almost as if the show betrayed the memory of our friend Eric Foreman and spent an entire season telling us to just get over it. When I say viewership of the show dropped, it was almost 40% during the show's 8th season, and without much gas left in the tank, it was decided that the show would end its run on May 18, 2006. Topher Grace did, however, return for the show's finale in an uncredited performance. His departure from That 70s Show wasn't born from spicy on-set drama, conflict with production staff, or even erratic behavior. It was born from his own desire to follow the career path that he wanted to carve out for himself. Sometimes when actors or artists make decisions like this, we can perceive them to be foolish or selfish for walking away from a successful project or leaving behind their fan base, but success isn't always determined by stability and money. Sometimes you need to go with your gut and pursue the career you want to build for yourself. And sometimes that means getting out of your comfort zone and jumping into something new and exciting. For Topher Grace, he had the financial stability to do that in the way he wanted to do it. He took the risk, he took the jump on his own accord. It's an extremely respectable move, and it seems to be paying off for the guy. After all, his new ABC comedy, Home Economics, was just picked up for a second season, so what did we learn here? You know, follow your dreams. It's cliche, but man, I mean, if you've spent 7 years at a job you don't maybe love that much, or maybe you're jaded by it, maybe it's time for a switch, especially in creative fields. A change of scenery can mean the world, and if you're able to do it, well, just Topher Grace.
Mr. Foreman, can I light this off in your house?
Sure. And then I'll light my foot off in your ass.
This is the season finale of That 70s Show, and despite the disjointed and empty mess the show's 8th season makes of the primary storyline, the season finale comes together in a way that feels like a perfect ending to the series. When a sitcom is ending its run, it's usually existing on borrowed time and wrapping up a show that is losing steam, something which That 70s Show was definitely in the process of doing. The series finale doesn't just stick the landing, it effectively pulls the entire show out of a complete nosedive, and it's largely due to a return to form. The final episode of a sitcom is almost never anyone's favorite episode. Time and time again, networks have found incredible difficulty delivering a satisfying finale to fans of the respective properties. Seinfeld's finale decided to focus on plot rather than humor. Scrubs had a finale and then awkwardly returned for a 9th season, and How I Met Your Mother killed off the mother that the show is titled after. These shows all kind of fall into the same trap over and over again. That trap being trying to do something big or trying to go out with a bang, if you will.
That's a shame.
Sitcoms are often a reflection of daily life. That's what makes them resonate so much with us, and that's what makes them so successful in the long term. They remind us who we are, the importance of our relationship to the world around us, and the friends we've made within it. When a finale takes all of that and throws it into the garbage for the sake of creating a largely unbelievable and exaggerated final episode, we don't go along for the ride. We actually disconnect entirely. This is what makes the finale of That 70s Show so impactful. It never goes for some ridiculously huge moment. Instead, That 70s Show reunites its cast for one final episode for the show to do what the show does best, telling small, personal stories through the eyes of well-thought-out characters, while leaning heavily into nostalgia to connect us to the story and drive the narrative. You may or may not be familiar with the concept of nostalgia porn. As a phrase, it refers to the current trend of filtering a story through a pastiche of various time periods. Some shows deliver nostalgia porn with great success, like the first season of Stranger Things. However, some shows rely on it too much and end up sacrificing story to pander to nostalgia, like the 3rd season of Stranger Things. As a tool, nostalgia is best when it's utilized as a spice and not as a main course. That 70s Show isn't a successful show because of all its subtle nods to 1970s culture. It's successful because it tells stories people can connect to, while using the backdrop of the 70s to support it.
Whoa! This will buy me a monster bag of marshmallows.
The finale of That 70s Show piles this nostalgia on top of more nostalgia. A nostalgia inception, if you will. It is truly the end of an era, not just for our characters in Point Place, Wisconsin, but also for us as viewers. The episode centers around the gang getting back together for one last hurrah before closing the door in the 1970s, and it feels like we're right there, celebrating alongside with them. New Year's Eve is the perfect setting because it's a time where we can put our differences aside and celebrate a universally appealing concept. This is also true for both the characters in That 70s Show and the audience, as the 8th season leading up to this point had left viewers confused and, well, a little upset. At the end of That 70s Show's 7th season, the show suffered a major setback with the departure of Topher Grace's character, Eric Foreman. In television, characters get written off with incredible frequency, but less frequent is the removal or replacement of a show's primary lead role. When it does happen, the show usually ends up becoming a shell of its former self, while desperately trying to fill a massive void left by these departures. Fans might have been disappointed that Ashton Kutcher reduced his role as Michael to just a few episodes throughout season 8, but removing Eric Foreman from That 70s Show entirely was a five-finger death punch into the heart of the series. And the show's 8th season was the final steps it was taking before completely collapsing.
Eric, not real good with words, so I thought I'd say goodbye the only way I know how. Hit it, boys.
After Eric left, the show went into immediate decline. Eric Foreman was the glue that held the show together, and without him, all of the pieces felt disjointed. They tried to shove this Randy character down our throats as a replacement, and it just really didn't work.
New guy, you're hired. Leo, you're not fired. Jobs for everyone. Well, that was hard, but it had to be done.
We covered this in a previous video, and we placed the link in the description. The point is, That 70s Show was in trouble. When it got announced that Topher Grace would be returning for the finale of That 70s Show, fans were given a glimmer of hope that the show might be able to somehow clean up the mess that it had made and deliver appropriate closure. And despite many of them being turned off by the introduction of Randy, audiences tuned in to see the series off in whatever capacity that ended up being.
And the last day of the 70s. You know, thinking back, it's like one big blur.
You're welcome.
That 70s Show's finale starts off in the absolute most perfect place for That 70s Show to end, which is on the final day of 1979. This turn-of-the-decade setting is satisfying to us right from the get-go, as it kind of fills in the blank that we'd been filling in our heads for so long, in that the series would inevitably end when the 1970s ended. We immediately jump into the exact thing the series had lost for an entire season: our characters just hanging out in their natural states. It's not trying to force anything to work, it's not trying to manufacture relationship drama or anything like that, it's just our favorite characters reflecting on the last decade and preparing to move on with their lives.
Why are we wasting our time talking about this? Donna's leaving town, it's the end of the decade. We should be doing something awesome, man. Something we have never done before. Or this.
There's something about nostalgia that makes us really forgiving about the past. We look back on things as being maybe a little better than they actually were, and sometimes we even get a little protective over the idea of that pristine nostalgia being tarnished in any way. This is true in life, and it translates directly into our viewing of this finale. There's this great moment at the top of this finale, let's call it Red Foreman's foot in the ass soliloquy.
How'd you like to own a little bit of my foot in your ass? How about I drive my foot into this thing called your ass?
Delivering this at the top of the show makes us laugh right away, which loosens us up for the remainder of the episode. This also serves a powerful second function by pulling on our sense of nostalgia and wistfully connecting us to a better time. This brief trip down memory lane primes the pump for a really enjoyable experience. The episode also backtracks on some of the more forced elements of the 8th season. First of all, that Randy character is only in this episode for about 5 seconds. He's just hanging around in the kitchen, watching while Hyde delivers Packers tickets to Kitty and then disappears from our lives forever. It's incredibly awkward to watch, but thankfully the show didn't elect to waste any time wrapping up a character that should have never existed in the first place. The largest backtrack, however, comes in about 1/3 of the way into the episode. with Red and Kitty Foreman deciding that they will not be moving to Florida after all.
Ever since we decided to move, you've been so happy and smiley, and you're never that way except for when you kill a deer.
This is met with much rejoicing by the show's supporting cast, but it also helps this finale feel great because we know that, despite the show ending its run, our characters are going to be right where we inevitably leave them. They aren't heading off to some stereotypical retirement in Florida, selling a sitcom based on their lives or anything like that. They're simply remaining, and it's quite comforting to think about. The initial tease of Eric Foreman missing his flight also hits home with us.
I circled the airport so many times that my finger actually hurts from flipping people off.
Mostly because Topher Grace's return to the show was also an exciting prospect for viewers who had spent the last 21 episodes yearning for him. In a way, we are all Donna at this moment. We're disappointed that he isn't there yet, but this delay in his arrival provides for an extremely impactful moment when he shows up in the show's final act, and reconnects with Donna, which again pulls at our feelings of nostalgia for the series. Throughout the rest of the episode, we're treated to some really familiar and heartwarming connections with the ensemble, and some genuinely hilarious moments with some of the show's supporting cast really getting some time to shine. Everyone gets a little nostalgia flashback sequence while they reminisce upon the last decade. The final image of the series is a nod to the first thing we see from Season 1, which is the gang hanging out in the basement while there's a huge party going on upstairs. It tells us that, despite the excitement and goings-on in the world around them, the real party has always been down here with Eric, Donna, Kelso, Jackie, Hyde, and Fez. Instead of sneaking upstairs to steal some of Red's beer, the gang heads up and joins the party, counting down to the end of the decade and the end of the series.
3, 2, 1.
The episode's ending doesn't really feel like an ending either. It feels like a new beginning without the promise of another season. These characters' lives are going to continue. Their relationships are going to grow, and our imaginations are left to run wild as the gang heads upstairs to usher in the 1980s. Hopefully someone insults Red, and maybe someone will actually get a foot up their ass.
Do you ever actually do that with your foot?
Once.
The finale of that 70s show is one of the few truly great sitcom finales to ever air. It doesn't focus on grandiose moments that feel out of place, and instead returns to its roots, providing the audience with a sense of wistful nostalgia while taking a look backward before it moves itself forward. It's well-placed, thoughtful, touching, and very funny. Exactly the way any great episode of that 70s show would be. The finale brings us a little bit of closure without causing us any grief or hardship, and leaves us wanting more.
Jim Morrison's a god.
A god who thought my breasts looked like mushrooms.
This is not a weird prequel to It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. This is That 80s Show. This seemed like a logical follow-up to Fox's largely successful primetime sitcom, That 70s Show. However, Fox's hopes and dreams for lightning to strike twice in the same exact place were quickly dashed, and the show was canceled after airing only 13 episodes. So, what happened here? With such a clear roadmap to creating a successful, nostalgia-saturated sitcom sitting right in front of their faces, how did Fox drop the ball this hard? When spin-offs are created, they usually go one of two ways. They either copy their parent series to the letter. We've seen a lot of successes here with countless NCISs and Law and Orders. Spin-offs also find great success in doing something completely different with a popular character, like Mork and Mindy, Laverne and Shirley, Frasier, or even The Jeffersons. Where shows usually fail is when they try to do both of these things at the same time. So, today, we're going to be trying to take a look at That 80s Show, and how trying to do two things at once can sink a spin-off series in just a few short months. That 70s Show aired in 1998 and ran for over 200 episodes until it was canceled in 2006. To this day, it is one of the longest-running sitcoms in Fox's television history. In fact, the show ran for so long it became a joke amongst the producers that they were eventually going to have to start calling it That 80s Show. As it would turn out, that joke would eventually become reality, and production on That 80s Show began in August of 2001. There was an interview conducted by the Daily Advertiser featuring one of That 80s Show's producers, Linda Wallum, in which she stated that the showrunners had been talking about what they had been doing in the 80s and found that they had all been in pretty much the same situation, which was supporting themselves with jobs they hated, but really burning to be in show business. She added that they created these characters as people who are constantly being pulled between their artistic dreams and commercial reality. Having this understanding about how the show was created almost makes it seem as if the show was written from a place of bitterness and frustration towards the era, and it definitely bleeds into the show's overarching themes.
Let me guess, a Cyndi Lauper lookalike contest? I think you've got a lock on it. That's so mean. You must be Tuesday.
You see, that 80s show was not a spin-off, despite being marketed as such. Rather than continue the storyline of that 70s show, that 80s show would sort of serve as a distant cousin to its predecessor. We mean that quite literally, as the spin-off was centered around this guy, Corey Howard, played by It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia star and co-creator Glenn Howerton. Corey Howard was introduced as Eric Foreman's cousin. This would be the only real connection made to the show's predecessor. The rest of the cast was filled in with characters who felt more like satirical representations of various 80s cliches rather than fully fleshed out human beings. It's not the strangest move for a sitcom spin-off to diverge from its predecessor entirely. Frasier did this with great success. The Cheers spin-off ran for 264 episodes and received over 107 Emmy Awards and nominations. The difference is, Frasier was a completely standalone series and its own identity. It wasn't called Cheers 2, Frasier Moves to Seattle, nor was it marketed as such. It was clearly defined as its own show, and while there are subtle nods back to Cheers here and there, it was a completely separate entity in its story and tone. Just naming the show That 80s Show cemented the idea that this show is going to be a direct spin-off of That 70s Show in the minds of the viewers. In utilizing this name convention, Fox was essentially making a promise to its viewers that they never intended on fulfilling. The promise being, hey, we're continuing the show that you loved, only they weren't. They were creating something completely different and expecting it to yield the same results. There's a saying that goes something to the effect of, happiness is reality minus expectations. And it rings true to the fans of any entertainment property. When our expectations are set at a certain level and are never met, we become dissatisfied. Our viewing experience becomes wholly negative, and our capacity of maintaining a vested interest depletes at a rapid pace. From a writing perspective, That 80s Show uses the same formula That 70s Show used, but where That 70s Show uses tropes and cliches from its titular era as an aesthetic to add to an already rich story about friendship, love, maturation, and the struggles of navigating early adulthood.
Oh, Red!
That 80s Show uses them to drive pretty much every aspect of the show.
I got this for you.
Oh, Jägermeister! So misunderstood. It's really a digestive aid.
That 70s Show relied on creating comedy through relationships and drama.
You think I like being stuck here, nursing my lunatic wife back from the brink? Hell no.
Whereas That 80s Show seems to go for the low-hanging fruit at almost every opportunity.
Wow, you're shallow.
I'm not shallow.
You're right, I'm sorry. You're more of a hypocrite.
The characters are written without any depth whatsoever. Characters are the fuel of every sitcom's engine. Sitcoms very seldomly break the mold as far as storylines go, where a film like Star Wars can rely on a truly unique world to highlight an otherwise run-of-the-mill character's choices. A sitcom must rely on their truly unique characters' choices to highlight an otherwise run-of-the-mill world. In That 80s Show, everyone just exists within the most simplified version of a stereotype you could possibly imagine. Where normally we'll have a compelling lead who seems vulnerable and sincere, Corey is written as a whiny, petulant Gen Xer who is trying to hook up with his coworker.
I'm pretty sure my girlfriend dumped me for a woman.
Happens.
My music career is not a career.
Happens.
And my hip dad wants me to get in the game.
The character of Sophia is almost immediately introduced as a bisexual, and after that, her entire character is just centered around being bisexual and trying to manipulate Corey's sister, Katie, into a romantic relationship.
I can't get the lady to want me. Then I'll get the lady's man to want the lady to want me.
Even the father figure, played by Jeff Pearson, is a stereotype of a creepy divorced dad who hates his ex-wife.
Oh, hold on a minute, Are you using the timeshare in Rosarito?
Why? Does she need someplace quiet to go and count my money?
It seems like there was an intentional shift to create these characters in complete contrast to the characters on That 70s Show. While this move is understandable for the perspective of wanting to provide something new for an audience, it doesn't work when you're trying to walk in the same exact footsteps as the show you're spinning off of. These characters have completely different attitudes, personalities, perspectives, and philosophies, yet the writers keep trying to force them into the same roles and relationships as the characters from a completely unrelated show. There was heart, warmth, and vulnerability to the character of Eric Foreman that just isn't present with Corey Howard. Despite the inherent tokenization of a quirky character portrayed by an underrepresented minority in both That 70s Show and That 80s Show, Fez's overdramatic, gullible, lover-not-a-fighter persona was at least made an attempt to humanize a character that would have otherwise felt like they were straddling the line between xenophobia and racism.
Oh, please. I'm a hard-looking, smooth-talking, frisky-ass son of a bitch.
This wannabe yuppie character of Roger Park was never really given any development beyond the fact that he lives in an attic, wants to have sex, and can't.
A steady chicken holidays equal nothing but cash. And I ain't about that, bro.
The point here is by flipping the script on essentially every character they possibly could, they inadvertently flipped the script on the chemistry between those characters that made them work so well. None of those characters seem to make sense together. Their relationships never click, everything feels sort of forced, dirty, and mean-spirited. That 80s Show was marketing itself to an audience who had already proven that they relate to everything this show was not. It was almost insulting to fans of the original series, and That 80s Show lost its target demographic very, very quickly. From the first to the final episode, That 80s Show lasted for an entire 5 months. Now, it was recently announced that Netflix acquired the rights to produce a new spin-off titled That 90s Show, and it seems promising. The show follows the Foreman family from That 70s Show, and a good chunk of the original cast is returning. That 80s Show should have worked. By all means, it probably could have worked. The creative team needed to either copy That 70s Show to the letter and just put it under an 80s aesthetic, or do something entirely different. Unfortunately, the decision was made to try and do both of those things at the same time, which ultimately resulted in a finished product that felt like it wasn't exceeding at any of those things. It failed to recreate the magic of That 70s Show, which was the show's heart. Relatability and focus on positive relationships. On the other side of the same coin, it also failed to be unique in any way, shape, or form, relying on cheap sexual humor and pointed references to 80s pop culture to hopefully drive its comedy through the seemingly eternal 22 minutes of each episode's runtime. Thankfully, it didn't last very long. Some of these episodes are available to watch online, and they might be worth a rewatch if you view the show as a fun framing device for how Dennis Reynolds became a monster.
We don't want wild girls. We want real girls going wild.
But aside from that, the show's minuscule 13-episode run was completely warranted.
As you know, I'm on the pill, so here is your copy of the prophylactic waiver.
Oh, looks like we have a deal here. I'm looking forward to consummation.
Excellent.
Thank you.
This is Donna Pinciotti. And this is how Donna ended up during That 70s Show's abysmal final season.
Hi, honey. Thank you for the postcard with the monkeys. I'm still bananas about you, too.
Over the course of the 8 seasons that the show dominated airwaves, Donna was developed into one of the most interesting and endearing characters on TV, and then completely kneecapped during the show's legacy-tarnishing slalom towards its ultimate conclusion. Laura Prepon's Donna Pinciotti might not be the first character you think of when you picture the cast of That 70s Show, but on a closer look, she really is one of the breakout characters.
Well, hey, Eric, don't you want your balls back?
Okay, now look, that's a little uncalled for. Oh, yeah, thanks.
Culturally, she was just overshadowed by Fez's cartoonish accent.
Michael, rub oil on my thighs while I spank you.
Or Kelso's idiotic comedic sensibilities.
You got a permanent.
So that's permanent?
In fact, most of the characters on That 70s Show had clearly defined narrative real estate that they lived in, but Donna was a bit more loosely defined early on in the show, which gave her more room to grow and change. Donna was literally and figuratively the girl next door in the show, but she was also so much more than that. She was a complicated person with a distinct background viewpoint and wry sense of humor.
Oh, believe me, Donna, I'd love to go, but Red said I can't, and... well, he can kick my ass, so...
Eric, I can kick your ass.
We also got to witness Topher Grace's Eric Foreman grow and mature through his relationship with Donna. They complemented each other and yet were also polar opposites. That was the joy of the early seasons of the show, seeing these two seemingly unlikely lovers bounce off of each other and learn and grow from their mistakes. This dynamic and all of its complexities are laid out in the show's inaugural episode, the climax of which is Donna and Eric Foreman sitting on the hood of a flashy Vista cruiser that Eric's father explicitly told him not to take out of town, and yet, thanks to Donna's encouragement, Eric and the gang use the car to attend a Todd Rundgren concert. Coming down off the high of this youthful rebellion, Donna and Eric bond, simmering with romantic tension. In some ways, Donna is presented as the manic pixie dream girl trope, but Crepon's performance is so self-assured and nimbly humorous that the rote elements of her role's initial characterization pale in comparison to the magic on the screen. The pilot climaxes with a quintessential high school moment, Eric Foreman not seizing the opportunity and going in for the kiss. So what does Donna do? She chooses to take the initiative, sealing their burgeoning romance with a single goodnight kiss.
What was that for?
I just wanted to see what it was like.
What was it like?
You were there?
Under normal sitcom narrative construction, this would have happened dozens of episodes and countless seasons into the run of a show. The Office took 4 seasons to finally get Jim and Pam together. For New Girl, it took 6 seasons to finally seal the deal with Nick and Jess. A normal sitcom wants to build an emotional investment in the two leads' emotional dynamic prior to eventually getting them together. This is the pilot of that 70s show. We understand from the jump that Donna isn't going to be your average love interest. She's going to be an equal partner in the show as it develops. And over the first season, we see countless examples of Donna's complexities and intricately woven emotional life written across the series. Like in episode 7 of the first season, where Donna chooses to sing and dance the night away with Eric, recreating the ABBA music they just witnessed together as a means of helping them both evolve. Donna and Eric quickly become the central narrative nucleus that the show revolves around. They are the emotional heart of the program. The show does a masterful job of illustrating why someone in Donna's position needs, enjoys, and loves someone like Eric Foreman. It all stems back to her relationship with her parents, Bob and Midge. Midge is a free spirit and Bob is more of a loud, out there ladies' man. Midge ends up leaving Bob since she was unhappy with being a housewife, and Bob subscribed to more of the man of the house sensibilities of the time. When Donna sees in Eric as the exact opposite, a progressive with a non-threatening physique and an intricate knowledge of Star Wars, and this is charming to her. Donna goes through 5 seasons of characterization. She has ups and downs, breakups with Eric, starts dating Luke Wilson's Casey Kelso in season 4.
Come here, little guy. Okay. All right, good to see you. Okay.
Then, in season 5, gets back together with Eric and we see how much they've matured but are stronger together. Despite the fact that Donna is in control for much of her relationship with Eric, the later seasons seem to lose the thread with her character. In season 5, they get engaged. However, Eric stands Donna up on the wedding day only to return saying he was scared.
All I knew was that Donna, I think we were about to make a huge mistake.
I'm sure there's a good version of this storyline that painted Donna in an empowering light, but it just feels weird and wrong that the show is doing all of this to her and that she's not the person dictating how things turn out, because that's been basically her role the entire show. This goes all the way back to the pilot when she's the one to initiate that first kiss. During season 7, Topher Grace and Ashton Kutcher were negotiating to leave the show to pursue other opportunities, and by the time season 8 rolled around, the narrative runway was already out from underneath the show. Because Topher Grace wasn't going to be there, Eric Foreman had decided to take a gap year and move to Africa, leaving Donna in the lurch despite the fact that she had deferred her college choices in order to be with him. Kelso is also only in 5 episodes of the final season. It's just a train wreck. The idea of Eric hurting Donna in this way is counter to both of the establishing characters. Him doing it violates the exact reasons why she loves him. Therefore, in later episodes where he returns, she would never take him back. It's very apparent from the beginning of season 8 that the showrunners did not know what to do with Donna. They were trapped into only viewing her through the Eric-shaped box they had put her in. After initially trying to introduce a new Eric stand-in named Charlie, they wrote him out of the show. Therefore, Josh Myers was cast as Randy Pearson. The showrunner showrunners decided to introduce Randy as equal parts Eric and Kelso. He could fill the narrative shoes of both of them, but also be presented as a potential love interest to Donna, which is as horrible as it sounds. Randy's whole thing is that everyone thinks he's perfect. Even Red likes him.
They taught me how to play their games of chance.
Donna, must be nice to finally have a boyfriend who can swing that sledgehammer and get that little black thing past seriously hit it.
And so that has to mean that Donna would immediately fall in love with him, right? It's not like there's 7 previous seasons where we learn that Donna doesn't want to be with an over-the-top ladies' man like her father. Season 8 just nerfs all of Donna's character development. Even early on in the season when Eric is in Africa and he's regularly calling his mother on the telephone, he never calls Donna.
So I asked Mrs. Foreman, is he okay? And she said, yeah, because he called her last night.
She even stays up through the night in one episode waiting for him to call, even though he doesn't. In a season filled with terrible ideas like Jackie and Fez should get together and what if Hyde marries a stripper, the way Donna is treated is both the most subtly horrible and the most frustrating.
He had to run to class. So I'm gonna go grab a beer.
Following closely behind the incomprehensible Donna and Randy romance storyline for strangest subplot involving Donna ever is the running narrative all throughout the final season that sees Kitty and Donna become estranged due to some mutually misplaced anger. This doesn't seem like anything that would ever happen. Donna might as well be Kitty's daughter at this point, and the whole season still takes place in their basement. Having Kitty and Donna be estranged, but then having her in the basement every episode feels forced and wrong. And to top it all off, their big reconciliation in the finale just feels completely hollow and unearned. Like everything in season 8, it just happens because it apparently needs to happen. By the final episode of the season, when Eric finally returns and he and Donna get back together, it's too little too late. The show has just belly flopped, dragged Donna through the mud, and completely ruined the beautifully unique character that had spent all of that time developing. It's really a shame how That 70s Show took one of the best and most tightly plotted characters and then just said, what if she dated Randy?
You guys always talk about the amazing times you had with your friends. I want that.
No, you know what? You can forget it.
I'm not getting in that car tomorrow and you can't make me.
Or you're getting in that car or my foot is getting in your ass.
That was the pilot of That 90s Show, the short-lived, recently canceled spinoff of the hit Fox sitcom That 70s Show. Or more precisely, the second short-lived spinoff of That 70s Show after the failure of the critically lambasted That 80s Show. At the time, we all thought nothing could be worse than That 80s Show, but we were wrong. So very, very wrong.
I have never been prouder. It's like watching you hit your first home run. If you'd ever done that.
That 70s Show debuted on Fox in 1998. Set in the fictional town of Point Place, Wisconsin, the series followed Eric Foreman, his immediate family, and his 5 best friends through the last 4 years of the 1970s. Embraced by fans and critics alike, the show would run for an astounding 200 episodes over 8 seasons. And in 2001, the network would order a sequel. That 80s Show followed a 20-something aspiring musician named Corey Howard and his friends in San Diego in 1984. But despite the title's implication of a spin-off, the only actual in-universe connection to the previous series was that the main character was Eric Foreman's cousin, and it wasn't important in any way. The show was a flop with both audiences and critics, and it was canceled just after 13 episodes.
Really? That's just wrong.
Now, you would think that kind of failure would be a franchise killer, but the original series found a second, or technically a third life on Netflix. In 2021, the streaming giant announced they were ordering yet another sequel called That 90s Show. Only, it seems like someone learned their lesson because That 90s Show would be a direct continuation of That 70s Show. The pilot finds Eric and Donna, now a grown-up married couple, bringing their teenage daughter Leia to visit Red and Kitty in Point Place for 4th of July weekend in 1995. Leia, a normally unpopular kid, starts hanging out with a group of area teens that includes Gwen, Ozzy, Nikki, Nate, and Jay, who happens to be the son of That 70s Show's Kelso and Jackie.
You're getting married?
Remarried.
That's our second remarriage. Well, this one's gonna stick, right?
Yeah.
Leia fights her father for the freedom to stay with Red and Kitty for the summer so she can hang out with her new friends and have the kind of experiences her parents used to have when they were her age. She prevails, and her parents take off. The pilot features the returns of Topher Grace, Laura Prepon, Ashton Kutcher, Mila Kunis, Kurtwood Smith, and Deborah Jo Rupp, and it teases the return of Wilmer Valderrama, which then occurs in the following episode. But from there on out, only Smith and Rupp stay on as regulars, while Prepon and Valderrama continue to play reoccurring roles. Otherwise, the series is mostly a coming-of-age story that follows Leia and her friends. As a group, they bear a fair amount of resemblance to the gang from the original show. Leia is clearly a proxy for the sweet, nerdy Eric. Gwen combines various aspects of Donna and Hyde. Nikki fills in for the assertive and high-strung Jackie. The acerbic Ozzy plays pretty much the exact same role as Fez, and the character of Michael Kelso has been split into Jay the heartthrob and Nate the dumb jock. And like their predecessors, they spend most of their time hanging out in Red and Kitty's basement. That 90s show is not only a sequel, it is a virtual carbon copy of that 70s show. As everyone knows, copies are rarely as sharp as their originals, but we can understand why they went that route. Netflix had also just had a hit with Fuller House, a direct sequel to the iconic 80s sitcom Full House, which had brought back most of that original show's cast, so rebooting another beloved sitcom using the same recipe probably seemed like a winning move. And it was, at first. Seeing so many familiar faces in the pilot got audiences excited, and that 90s show debuted to solid numbers and lukewarm to positive reviews. But when the old cast stopped showing up, so did audiences. And ultimately, that 90s show would barely outlast that 80s show, running for a mere 26 episodes over 2 seasons before being canceled due to low viewership. So what went wrong? Well, a lot of things. The failure of characters like Eric, Michael, and Jackie to be involved past the pilot certainly deflated audiences a bit, and a handful of elements from the original series, like Red's habit of repeatedly threatening kids with violence,
I will grab them by the back of their collar and toss them into next week,
as well as the borderline racist and homophobic stereotypes embodied in Fez, were recycled wholesale despite not aging all that well. A lot of the things that went wrong with that 90s show were the same things that went wrong with that 80s show, like the whiny, petulant protagonist, the cliche characters, and the general over-reliance on gratuitous references to the time period for laughs. Just like with Corey on that 80s show, Leia, especially in the pilot, comes off as kind of a bratty and unlikable kid, and we're in no way blaming Callie Haverda, the 15-year-old actress who played the character. The problem was with the material. Leia and her friends were less like fully formed people than they were one-dimensional 90s stereotypes who just did whatever the writers needed. Leia, for example, meets Gwen by creepily spying on her through a window while she's singing along to Alanis Morissette. By 90s standards, Leia is supposed to be a nerd and Gwen is a cool kid, but none of that seems to matter, so they can instantly become best friends and Leia can have a gang just like her parents did. And Gwen's older brother Nate is a run-of-the-mill dumb jock stereotype, but he hangs out with the exact same group as his rebellious purple-haired sister. The group also includes Nate's girlfriend Nikki, who is an ambitious go-getter. The two spend a huge amount of time making out, but otherwise the show doesn't do much to explain why these two would be attracted to each other, or even run in the same circles. Leia immediately falls for the ostensible heartthrob Jay, but he's about as bland as love interests come, and the show doesn't do much to make us understand why Leia would be interested in him, or vice versa. The show doesn't do much to help us understand why anyone in this random assortment of toothless 90s cliches would even be friends. They just are. They don't seem to be designed to do much more than serve as a delivery system for hammy, obvious jokes about the time period.
There's only 24 pictures on this camera, and I don't want to waste any of them. 23.
The dated use of a laugh track to try and prop up the proceedings doesn't help much either. It's a problem because that 70s show, the series they're trying so hard to imitate, wasn't just a bunch of 70s jokes set to a cheesy laugh track. And it wasn't just an excuse to hear Red threaten some teenager's ass with his foot every week. It was a smartly crafted sitcom that used a 70s aesthetic to lend some style to the funny stories it told about its relatable characters, and the growth they experienced by knowing each other. But none of that works if the audience doesn't truly love the characters in the first place and emotionally invest in their relationships. We'd argue that the main problem with that 90s show is the thing we think is chiefly responsible for making the original series such a hit: the on-screen chemistry of the actors who play the teenage characters at the center of the show. Just like the cast of hit shows like Friends and Seinfeld, the cast who brought the gang from that 70s show to life had an undeniable spark with each other in virtually every conceivable combination, which made the fictional teens feel like a real-life friend group that viewers couldn't wait to hang out with each week. That's why it's so baffling that that 90s show seems to have completely punted in this department. We're not placing the blame on the actors themselves, but it's hard to miss the fact that the gang from that 90s show has pretty much no chemistry. Not as characters, not as actors, not as anything. So once the audience got over the thrill of seeing Red and Kitty back in action, there just wasn't much to lock into.
I'm sorry, Kitty. I love you. but I just can't do this.
Given their track record so far, we're going to assume that we're not likely to see that 2000 show anytime soon. But when the time comes that some streaming service does finally take the franchise out of mothballs again, our advice is this: regardless of what time period it's set in, and regardless of whether it's a direct sequel or a completely new deal, the one thing you absolutely, positively must give fans is a gang with which they want to spend every week hanging out down the street.